Hello, beautiful people, and welcome. In this video, we are solving quadratic equations. So this is a review for all things solving quadratic equations. We will be working with factoring, we will be working with square roots, completing the square, and the quadratic formula. As always, if I make a mistake, that's okay. Please let me know where the mistake occurs so that way I may learn from it. So when you're solving a quadratic equation by factoring, so we'll do factoring first, you want to move all of the terms to one side and set it equal to 0, just like we have here. So notice this one does not have all terms to one side. So I'm going to move everything over. I'm going to add 49 to both sides. So I have n squared is equal to, is positive. We're adding 49, I already forgot, is equal to negative 14n. So I'm going to add 14n to both sides. Again, you don't have to show me work for this. You can just rearrange it and give me what we have. Now make sure you do have it in standard form, and standard form means that you have a decreasing exponential values. So notice I have it squared, nothing, and then n. So that means I have to rearrange it. N squared plus 14n plus 49 is now equal to 0. This is the equation that we will be working with. So when you're solving by factoring, you're doing just that. You are factoring your polynomial, your trinomial. So we're going to use the guess and check method since our leading coefficient here is 1. Then we have n and n here, two numbers that multiply to 49 but add up to 14. That means it's 7 and 7. Now here are our factors. Now again, we're not done yet. We're going to take each bubble, each parentheses. We're going to set it equal to 0 and solve. Now if you're in my class, you do not have to show me work for this. You can just go from your factored form to giving me your answer by asking yourself, what does n have to be in order for this bubble to be 0? And what does n have to be in order for this bubble to be 0? So I'm going to subtract 7. So in this case, it looks like we will just have one answer as n is equal to negative 7. Let's do that one more time. Here we have a trinomial with the leading coefficient of 2. Step number 1 is always to see if you have a GCF. I have a 2, 18, and a 16. I do believe we can take out 2. Remaining, I have n squared plus 9n plus, what is that, 16? Trying to think here. 16 divided by 2 is 8. So then we have a leading coefficient of 1, so we're going to continue factoring this part. Guess and check because we have a leading coefficient of 1 already. So we have n here and n here. Two numbers that multiply to 8 but add up to 9. I have 8 and 1, both positive. Bring down your GCF, which is 2. Now once again, you're going to take each bubble, you're going to set it equal to 0, and you're going to solve for n. All right, so you're going to subtract 1, n is equal to negative 1 here. Subtract 8, n is equal to negative 8 here. And then look at this one. This one says 2 is equal to 0. First of all, there's no n for us to solve. There's no n. Second of all, 2 is never 0. If I have $2 or I have no money, that's very different. So therefore, this is not a true statement, so we do not include it. So we have two answers. We have n is equal to negative 8 and we have n is equal to negative 1. Now there are different methods for factoring. You need to know all of the methods, the difference of squares, when a is 1, a is not 1, trinomial factoring. So make sure you have all of that as your prior knowledge coming into solving these quadratics by factoring. Now we have taking the square root. Now taking the square root, you potentially do need a calculator, but you can get away with not having a calculator. Some of these numbers could be small. Step number 1 is you want to get your variable, your x squared, by itself. Now you do know you have to take the square root because you only have one variable in here. For example, x squared, or you can have like n squared. Notice that in this example, there's no other n's In this example, there's no other x's, so therefore you have to use taking the square root method. I'm going to subtract 6 both sides, so you want to get everything away from your x squared, for example, 1 here. 42 minus 6, that is equal to 36. So I have 4 times x squared here, divided by 4, divided by 4. X squared is equal to 36 divided by 4. Simplify that fraction if you can. So 36 divided by 4 is 9. So I have x squared is equal to 9. Now you take your square root. Now remember, when you're taking your square root, you're always going to have a plus or minus, and you're always going to have an index of 2. The index of 2 and the exponent of 2, this one and this one, they undo each other, like division and multiplication undo each other. The index and the exponent undo each other, so therefore we have x left over, and on this side have plus or minus the square root of 9 is 3, because 3 times 3 is 9, and then we have the minus, which is negative 3 times negative 3 is also 9. So here we have it. All right, moving on to example number 2. Once again, we're going to get rid of everything except the n squared. We're going to add 3 to both sides. So I have 4. That means 100 times n squared divided by 100 divided by 100. N squared is equal to 4 divided by 100. Simplify the fraction if you can. I know 2 goes into 4 and 2 goes into 100. So I have n squared is equal to 1 over 25. So I just realized that 4 goes into 4 and 4 goes into 100, 25. So then we take the square root, both sides. Again, remember your index and remember your plus or minus. So I have n left over on my left-hand side. And on this side, we have to do something that's splitting the square root. So what that means is we're going to have our plus or minus. That doesn't change. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the square root of the numerator and the square root of the denominator separately. So I'm going to take the square root of 1 and I'm going to take the square root of 25. Now we can do this because of the properties for, roots, for square roots, and because we have division. Division and multiplication are very special when it comes to properties, so we can do it this way. If we had addition or subtraction, that would not happen. So we have n is equal to plus or minus. The square root of 1 is simply 1. The square root of 25 is 5. So I have a fraction of plus or minus 1/5. So that is how we solve the quadratic equation, by taking the square root. Let's do 2 more methods. The first one we're going to do here is completing the square. When you're doing completing the square, you want to get everything without a variable to the opposite side. So I'm going to get rid of this negative 10 by adding 10 to both sides. So I'm left over with a squared minus 10a, and on this side I'm left with a positive 5. Now, the next thing we do is we take this middle term. We're going to divide by 2. That gives us, what is that? Negative 5. Then I'm going to square it, which gives us 25. So then I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to add 25 to both sides. So our next step is to write this in factored form. So I have a squared minus 10a plus 25 is equal to 30. I'm writing this in factored form. So because we already know what our factor is going to be, our factor is going to be our b value divided by 2. So this negative 5 is our factor. So I'm going to write this as a minus 5 squared is equal to 30. I'm going to shift this over here since I have more space. I'm going to rewrite this as a minus 5 squared is equal to 30. Now we're going to take the square root of both sides. Don't forget your plus or minus. So I have a minus 5, the square root and the index go away, is equal to plus or minus the square root of 30. Now, square root of 30 is not a pretty number. We can see if we can pull anything out from it. That's a perfect square. 15 times 2 is 30. However, 15 is not a perfect square. 2 is not a perfect square. 4 does not go into 30. That's an icky number, so we're going to leave it as 30 as it cannot be simplified. Now, notice we have this plus or minus here. That means we're not done. And notice that a is not alone. We need to solve for a. We are solving a quadratic equation. So we're going to split this up into two equations. A minus 5 is equal to a positive square root of 30, and a minus 5 is equal to a negative square root of 30. I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So I have a is equal to, and you want to put this number in front of the square root, not behind it, 5 plus square root of 30. And I have here a is equal to 5 minus the square root of 30. So here are our two answers. Let's do that one more time. Again, step number 1, move the constant over anything without a variable in it. So I'm going to subtract 7 both sides. So negative 8 plus a negative 7, that gives me a negative 15 here. I'm left over with 5k squared minus 20k on this side. Notice that your leading term has a coefficient of 5. You cannot do completing the square with a leading coefficient that is not 1. So therefore we have to take this 5 and divide each number by it. So that way we can get a 1 here as our leading coefficient. So what we're going to have is k squared minus 4k, and here we have a negative 3. Now we can continue with our completing the square. Take your middle term, divide that by 2, square it. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. I'm going to shift this up. We're going to square that number, which gives us a positive 4. Positive 4 is what you're adding to both sides. So what are we going to have? I'm going to shift this here. I'm going to rewrite this. I have k squared minus 4k plus 4 is equal to a positive 1. Now, notice that we had a negative 3 here. If at this point right here in this step we end up having it equal a negative number, then you no longer have a solution, because taking a square root of a negative number is not a real answer, so we would say no solution. But because 1 is positive, we can continue. We're going to write this as our factors. We know what goes inside of the parentheses, which is our b divided by 2. In this case, it is negative 2. So we have a k minus 2 squared is equal to 1. We're going to take the square root of both sides. Remember your plus or minus. And remember you have a secret index of 2 here, which goes away. So then what do we have left over? We have k minus 2 is equal to plus or minus 1. Again, notice that your k is not alone. It is attached to this minus 2, so we are not done. We're going to separate this out into two equations. K minus 2 is equal to 1, and k minus 2 is equal to negative 1. Adding 2 to both sides, I have k is equal to 3, and k is equal to a positive 1. All right, one more style of solving quadratic. And this way is solving by quadratic formula. So I'm going to write out the quadratic formula here. So we have x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all multiplying, divided by 2 times a. So what I like to do is, first of all, you need to have all of your terms onto one side. So I'm going to move over 72 by subtracting 72 on both sides. So you're going to have 0 equal to, and your equation needs to be in standard form, so decreasing exponential value. So 2, 1, 0, and you're good. You need to identify your ABCs. Now make sure when you're identifying your ABC, you take the symbol in front of the number. So here I have A is 5, B is -9, and C is -72. Once you have identified your ABCs, rewrite the equation, but instead of writing your B's and your A's and your C's, you're going to leave them as blank bubbles. And I like to do it this way because then it just leaves me space to write in my ABC. So this should be a B, which is -9, -9, minus 4A, which is 5, and C, which is -72, and A down below here is 5. Now, some of you will choose to do the square root first. That's fine. What I actually like to do, and I'm going to show you here on my calculator, is I like to type everything in. I'm going to see if you guys can see it at the same time, and then just press enter. I might press enter multiple times, so I'm going to say negative, parenthesis, -9. Actually, let's leave that out because I have a plus or minus here that kind of ruins things. Let's start with our square root. So -9 squared minus 4 times 5 times -72. I just want to make sure that that's correct. -9 squared minus 4 times 5 times -72. And that gives me a really big number, so 1521. So I'm going to start simplifying here. Negative and a negative make a positive, so I have 9 plus or minus the square root of 1,521 divided by 5 times 2, which is 10. I'm going to then go back in and take the square root of 1,521 and see what that gives me. That gives me 39. I'm very happy with 39 because it is a pretty number. We're going to rewrite this without the square root because you already took it. Now here notice that you're going to take this plus or minus. You are not done. So you're going to have to rewrite the equation twice. So I'm going to rewrite this here. 9 plus or minus 39 divided by 10. You're going to do a positive version of that. So a 9 plus 39 divided by 10 and a minus version. So 9 minus 39 divided by 10. And again, I'm going to type that into my calculator. And I'm going to use parentheses for the numerator. So 9 plus 39, 39 divided by 10. And the reason I like to use parentheses is because I want to tell the calculator, hey, both 9 and 39 are in the numerator. So that gives me a fraction of 24 fifths. Now my calculator does simplify things automatically. So originally this probably was not the original answer, but it was simplified. That's okay. So let's do the next one. Parenthesis 9 minus 39 divided by 10. And that gives us -3. So notice I am setting the equation equal to, or the answer equal to x, because what is the purpose of what we're doing? Our purpose is to solve the quadratic equation, and when you're solving it, you have to have it equal to some sort of variable at the end. Let's do this quadratic equation one more time. Again, notice that this is not in standard form, so you have to put it in standard form. So you have p squared minus p minus 18 is equal to 0. Identify your ABCs. Now notice there's nothing in front of p squared and there's nothing in front of p. When you don't have anything, that is equal to 1. So that means for your A value, A is 1. For your B value is -1. And for your C is equal to -18. Let's write out our equation. So I have negative, I'm going to shift this up. I have a negative bubble plus or minus bubble squared minus 4 bubble divided by 2a. Just fun saying bubble. All right, so we have inside of our first bubble, we have a b, and I'm referring to this formula that we rewrote here all the way to the top. That's what I'm looking at. So I have b, which is -1, a, which is 1, c, which is -18, and then 2 times 1, which is a. Again, working inside of the square root, I'm typing this into my calculator, -1 parentheses squared minus 4 times 1 times -18, and that gives me a 73. So again, negative, make a positive, plus, minus the square root of 73 divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. Now I'm going to take the square root of 73, and that's already giving me anxiety because I don't think that works, and so it does not. It stays as the square root of 73. Some calculators will give you like a decimal. If it gives you a decimal, it's not a pretty number. Keep it as a square root. So I'm going to rewrite this twice now. So 1 plus the square root of 73 divided by 2. 1 minus the square root of 73 divided by 2. Now, is there something for us to simplify here? There's not really anything for us to do. Now, you can choose to do this. 1 divided by 2 and square root of 73 divided by 2. 1 divided by 2 minus square root of 73 divided by 2. You can choose to do that. It is up to you, or you can just leave it as the original format because there's nothing for us to simplify. These would be your answers. All right, beautiful people, that wraps up this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.